There was a story that happened, I think it was like August 28th, maybe 29th, somewhere up in that general area. I got a call from the Costilla County Sheriff. He never gave me his name, but he asked me if I could meet him up around 5 o'clock in the evening to talk about some burglaries that had happened out in the county.
And how did he get your number?
That I do not know. It was just totally out of the blue. When I got there at 5, he then asked me if I got a phone call from him again asking if I could wait a little bit. He said he was running behind. By the time he actually interviewed me, it was close to 10 o'clock.
And where exactly did this interview take place?
This took place at the Costilla County Sheriff's Office, the main building where the jail and everything is in downtown San Luis, Colorado. And I went in. I had a small kitten with me at the time. Because it had taken so long for this interview to go on, I had asked if it'd be okay to take the kitten inside, and the kitten was extremely hungry at the time. So I sat down with this sheriff and come to find out that he didn't even want to talk about any burglaries out there at all. There was just no mention of that at all. He then started asking me questions about people that were living out there in that area. Now, at that time, I didn't even know there was any land disputes or what do they call it? Any disputes with the codes and stuff like that. And this was the first time I became aware of any of that kind of stuff going on. He then said to me that he needed somebody to act as an eyes or ears for the Costilla County Sheriff's Department. He said I could either cooperate with him on this, or he kind of hinted in a such and such way. He even was doing this little thing. He said, you could end up getting pulled over and arrested. Why, it would be a shame to pull you over and find drugs in your vehicle. And he said that he wanted me to keep an eye on it, eyes and ears open on any of the activities going on out there. Apparently at that time there were rumors of off-gridders with guns, off-gridders threatening they were going to shoot any officials. There was even stories going as far as the off-gridders got hand grenades and stockpiles of weapons, and they're going to come down here and start shooting up the town. And he just wanted me to be his eyes and ears and report to him of anything that was going on down there.
And again, what date was this?
I would say possibly around the 28th, 29th of August. I can't be 100% sure.
Okay, so about a week and a half before the Planning Commission of September 9th, where
Yes.
nearly 50 off-the-grid residents came and spoke their mind.
Exactly, yes. Yeah, and at that time, I didn't even know any of this trouble. And he asked me to be the eyes and ears and keep an eye on... He mentioned Chloe Everhart's name. Then he got up and left his desk. And because I had the kitten there, I acted like I was interested in picking up the kitten and see if the kitten was okay. Well, I looked on his desk, and there was 2 files. Very thick files, and there were several pictures of aerial photographs of the San Luis Valley. You know, you could see trailers in there, and I actually got up and made sure there was no security cameras around, and I flipped through there as quietly and as carefully as I could be. He was gone for about 20 minutes, so it gave me a lot of time to flip through there. And there was also pictures that he or somebody in the police department had taken of the residents. So definitely there was evidence that they were keeping an eye on people and spying, and there was something that they were really worried about at that time.
Okay, so when he dropped Chloe's name, what was the specific reference? What was exactly said?
Keep an eye on Chloe Everhart and her... I can't remember exactly how he said cohorts.
Mm-hmm.
And I had mentioned to him that I didn't really know her that well, that I had only met her one time before that, but she seemed She seemed like the last person on earth that you would ever really need to keep an eye on.
What connection did you have with Chloe prior to that? How did he connect you with Chloe?
I had met Chloe and Hiram at the community garden here in Antonito, Colorado. She had mentioned that she had just bought a piece of property out there, and at that time Daniela still had her property out there, and I had mentioned that we lived near the bridge, I think about 2 miles from the bridge, and she too said that she was living near the bridge, but we got the bridges mixed up. The old bridge is where we lived, and they lived more out towards Highway 15. And so I thought, them living so close, I always thought, we would, get together sometime. And then I didn't see or hear anything until after, well, it was around this time of the meeting that I had met her again and actually looked on Facebook and looked her up and found out that there was this, and I'm not sure how long the page had been there, the San Luis Valley page. But as far as I know, there has never been any kind of trouble or threats or anything of residents on that page. The only thing I've ever seen on that page is people who had posted some fake accounts, and they were the ones that were trying to stir up the trouble. There was at least 2 attempts by somebody claiming that they were part of the Amish group. Then there was another person who posted that they lived in Antonito and her partner were going to move out there and live off the grid. And I think I had made an enemy when I had actually commented on the page that this was a fake profile.
People turned against you.
Yes.
In the San Luis Valley Just Us group.
And then my little friend here, Pinky. Now, Pinky had his own little fan page. It was mostly a musical stuff. He's a big fan of Pink Floyd and the Beatles and such. And Pinky had made some comments on there. As you know, Pinky himself has had some issues with living off the grid in a house that he had built out of sticks, and a big bad wolf came and knocked it down. And well, somebody put up a fake Pinky McStuffings thing. See, this is the real Pinky McStuffings, and as you can see, the picture of the little pig that appeared in the other one was not Pinky. And I never got to read the stuff that was put there. I only got a email saying that Pinky McStuffings had mentioned you. Well, I thought that's a little odd because Pinky's account had gotten shut down. So I get on there, and there's all of this stuff about it's a fake account, how dare Keith insult us Amish, and somebody even put a picture of me and Pinky together that they took off there, and after I'd explained to the lady that it wasn't me that did it, she apologized, and then she took herself off the San Luis page. But
not to mention, as soon as the page was formed, someone with a profile said they were from Chicago, who had very few friends, 21-year-old kid, apparently. He was making comments about disarming Costilla County deputies. This person was not even involved with the off-the-grid movement. However, his quotes, which were never properly moderated nor removed from that website, were reprinted by Maria Martinez and quoted by a few others. So it seems like there's a pattern of that with the fake profiles with that group.
Yes. I cannot be sure who is 100% behind that, but somebody definitely went through a lot of trouble.
Now, going back to the sheriff's deputy, can you identify him?
Little short guy with glasses. I never caught his name because he had his little name tag on there, and I just, didn't get that close to him. And the fact is that I was sitting over on this side of the desk, and he was kind of sitting there, like, on this side with his hands cocked behind his head. He was very cocky.
So you don't know if it was Andrew Espinoza or if it was another deputy, but he had glasses on.
He did have glasses, short, I'd say Hispanic.
And when there was the threat of planting drugs, any specific drugs were they mentioned, or just drugs in general?
Drugs in general. I mean, I imagine now marijuana is legal in this state, and as long as you're not high behind the wheel. I was going to guess cocaine, possibly. He never mentioned it. He just said it would be too bad if you got pulled over and we found something in your car. Now, that something could be drugs. It could have been a stolen handgun. As we all know, cops have, they get quite a few guns and drug arrests and seizures and such like that. And yeah, so I had talked to my family about it. I made sure that everybody knew about this threat. My dad said, well, you don't need to worry about that because you've never had any prior drug arrest. You don't use the stuff. And if this happens, you know, we'll just buy you a good lawyer and you'll be out of that mess.
So when you looked at the photographs on the table, what were you able to make out?
Well, they were all, some of them were actually in color. They were printed, but they were in color. You can make out several buildings, trailers, horse corrals. Some of the places were kind of cluttered with broken vehicles. Other places were perfectly clean. And others showed, there were pictures of people like just out working on their fences, working in their gardens. So they definitely, I couldn't say for sure if it's drones that they were using. Probably for the aerial pictures, I'd say they were probably using some sort of spy drone. Somebody had said that they had seen a drone flying around out there. The other pictures, since I'm a photographer, I know that I could hide out somewhere and shoot a picture of over a mile away just on my camera, and it's nothing really all that fancy. But from a mile away, I could shoot a picture clear enough to tell what color your eyes are.
Well, the federal government is testing drones, new drones all the time. It's also possible that maybe it was one of the many Cessnas. Was there any indication of the distance they were from the ground when they were taking the pictures?
I would say depending on how large the property was. If it was a smaller property with just a trailer and a few cars and a dog pen, you could get a lot of detail.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of wish that I had, if I'd known that I could have got away with it, I would have loved to stuff one of those down my shirt and walked out with it. But I think he might have possibly noticed that.
And were there any other witnesses? Were there any other deputies, secretaries in the office that may have heard this threat?
No, because he asked everybody to leave the room.
Okay, and so you're not sure what his title was? You didn't get his card, whether it was Undersheriff or Sheriff?
No.
Okay.
And because at that time I didn't even know any of the sheriffs or any of them down there at all. At the time when I had first come into that valley, you know, everything was very peaceful, quietly, but I think it was because I was more of a tourist back then. I was photographing the old church, photographing a lot of the old buildings in town. So I never had any
Right,
problems.
you said you've had a lot of positive experiences going into San Luis and their library and talking to some of the locals and appreciating the history.
Yes. Yeah, no one there has ever been mean or rude. And, you know, when I first mentioned ever moving down into this area, a lot of people up in Denver, of course, said, well, why would you move down there? There's a bunch of white supremacists, a bunch of drug gangs, and none of that. I have never seen any of that. There's supposed to be some hippie cult living out there off the grid. So all these off the grid stories got started somehow. And for those of us that live out there, of course, you don't see any of that stuff.
Well, who knows how many rumors were started on both sides to get us looking the wrong direction. And I mean on both sides. But having said that, talk about your experience being pointed at aggressively by Roger Marsh. What was that about? And your intentions going there to document Roger Marsh at that infamous event that everybody now knows about.
Well, I had first met Roger Marsh when he was down there in St. George, Utah. There was some trouble out there, but I never went out there to see or photograph any of the trouble that was going on out in St. George at that time. Roger Marsh used to come to the park, and he used to talk all of this stuff about how he was a member of the Patriots and all that, and apparently he wasn't. Some people kind of got a little offended that he was out there claiming to be a part of this group when he wasn't. I never let Roger Marsh know that I had met him. I had heard him ranting and raving down there in the city park. Yes. I was already living in that area. It was a great place to take pictures. Giving me access to Zion, giving me access to a lot of the really nice red rock and desert scenery. And I was already out there prior to the Bundy thing taking off. But when it did take off, I didn't go out there because there was just a lot of guns and a lot of cops, and you couldn't even get through the roadblocks and such. And there was a lot of people that just were going out there just to spectate. So I stayed out of that area. However, there was a park in the middle of St. George, a little water park, and Roger Marsh would show up down there and start talking all this stuff, handing out literature. When he had come out here, at first I didn't recognize who he was. The first time I ever saw him was when he showed up at the meeting and he was interviewing Neil Taylor. I actually thought he was from the press. And when I saw him the second time at the meeting, it might have just been coincidence, as I'm sure it was. I was just happened to be sitting in the front row in the couch there, and he had told you that you couldn't film. And well, at the time I thought it was the house owner that wanted no cameras and stuff, so I put my camera away and put my cell phone away. Later on in the meeting, Roger Marsh, and he did make a good point. He said that the reason I don't want cell phones on and cameras on and this being recorded is because the police like to send inside informers in. And he looked right at me and he points his finger and says, and the cops like to send inside informers. And I was like, does he know about me and the sheriff having a little slight conversation? Well, it was worth it to hang around and listen to this guy, because the more he talked, if he'd just talked a little bit and left, it would have been believable. But the longer he talked, the more holes began to pop up in the story. But I guess my biggest concern is I haven't informed on anybody on that group at all, and I have not gotten in contact with that sheriff like I was supposed to. But I have a feeling that I couldn't have been the only one. Like, sooner or later, they're going to pull somebody over. They're going to catch somebody doing something, and then they're going to make this little deal. You be an informant, and we'll let this whole thing go. Or things are going to go bad for you in court. I believe that that's why there was all that trouble on that Facebook page. Possibly the idea is to get everybody fighting amongst each other, and for a while, those fake profile pages were doing just that. Well, I think there's been a lot of stories about white supremacist off-gridders. Yeah, there's probably a few people out there that, well, they kind of live a little bit on what you might call the filthy side. You go out there, you're going to see the whole yard is filled with broken down cars, pieces of this and that, and old washing machines that probably haven't ran since 1970 out there. But you're also going to see a lot of very clean and decent places. As far as I'm concerned, it's affordable land, and people that are on SSI and such, well, we can't afford a really nice, good piece of land, say, in Estes Park. So a lot of people just want to build something kind of nice and respectable out there. Right. I've been to Robin's place, and I can't find anything that I would personally get offended and say, oh my God, I don't like this, or how, having her as a neighbor or whatever. She does have chickens and stuff like that, but she lives very nicely and very country.
One last question on the Roger Marsh thing. You said cars were falling.
Yes.
When you guys left.
I watched a few people that just got fed up with listening to Roger Marsh babble on and on and on, and they left. I noticed that late at night, around 9 o'clock-ish, I noticed that when two cars took off, they were then being followed by another car. And later that night, we took Chloe, Hiram, and two other friends. We took them home, and right after we left the property, we were being followed. When we dropped them off, then the car stopped up at the hill shut its lights off, but as soon as me and Daniela left, started heading home, then the car lights came back on and it followed us clear up until we were completely out of the county.
Mm.
I did notice that when we went to the old bridge to meet as well, I counted, Daniela and I, we got there a little bit too early because I don't know what the reason is that we got there too early, but we had about a half hour, and there was one sheriff out there on the Cohinos side that came out there, and there was one vehicle from Bureau of Land Management that came out. He actually slowed down and stopped, looked the group over. By then there was about 5 or 6 other cars that made it out there. And I noticed immediately he got on his little radio and was talking to somebody. So they definitely have been keeping an eye.
And it should also be noted that it was put on Facebook where the meetup location was. So
yes.
Anyone that would be involved in Facebook surveillance would have all the information that they need. One more question. What would you like to add that we haven't already covered? What do you think should happen? What else should people know?
Well, I don't know how long Chloe had that page up, the San Luis Valley Just Us page. Probably, I'm guessing now the cops or whoever's keeping an eye on all the off-gridders, well, if that page is up, they obviously know about it. Even you had talked about how you had posted that you were going through the county and you ended up getting followed and escorted clear out of the county, and you even filmed it. So,
and that was on my personal page.
I think the cops don't really need an informer because everything that's going on is on that page.
Yeah.
I will honestly say as far as I know, there is no guns. There is no group of people that are going to come into the town and rape, rob, and loot or whatever. So people in San Luis Valley have absolutely gritters.